Seekers, this is Duality Huntress, and the topic of this video is sort of like a blend of a couple of different ideas, as well as me relating like a personal story and what I sort of found out from that personal experience. So initially I had this idea of making a video about tarot readers who give readings for zodiac signs, since there's like a plethora of them on social media these days. But I also had the idea to make a video about life coaches and what I think of them, since again there's like a lot of them on social media as well. For my story that I'm going to be relating, there was this one tarot reader that I was following for like a year and a half, who was a tarot reader, but also claimed to want to be a life coach as well. So this video, I'm kind of like taking a cue from that and sort of like blending those two ideas together. I do think the tarot reading and life coaches do kind of have a couple of commonalities. Like they both try to offer advice, give advice to people on like how to live, or at least try to offer insights to help people get from like from point A to point B. So there's that. So back in late autumn of 2017, I was trying to get over an emotional attachment to someone who I knew was never going to reciprocate my feelings, and I sought to gain insight as to like why I had done that in the first place, and also to try and get in a better mindset to be in an actual romantic relationship, because that's what I wanted, obviously. So I started searching out tarot readers on YouTube, and the person that I wound up listening to the most often seemed to have this very no-nonsense attitude about them, which I liked, which I vibed with. They talked about a lot about leveling up and working smarter and being more organized and not taking BS from people so much. And a lot of her readings that she would give, I would say were pretty accurate to my life at the time. So I started watching this person more frequently. And as a consequence of watching her videos at that time, I did more journaling, did more spell work geared towards emotional healing, and also figured out the traits that I wanted in a potential partner, which ones I was willing to compromise on, and as well as traits that were deal breakers for me. Then I started trying to actively date again, and soon thereafter found the man who I'm still in a relationship with to this day. However, as my relationship with my boyfriend became more serious, I began to notice that the readings that this tarot reader who I was watching would give seemed to be less accurate over time. I also started to notice this life coach's tarot reader's more problematic behaviors that I hadn't really noticed initially. So I hesitate to classify this as problematic necessarily. It's just something that kind of bothered me a bit. And it's something that I only really noticed over time. And I understand relationships are complicated, so that's why I'm a little bit hesitant to say this is problematic. But then again, like this is a person who's like, tries to give like relationship advice. So this person would do these live streams where she would give readings, and she would also talk a lot about her own life and her own relationships. But one thing that I noticed that did bug me was she always seemed to be stuck kind of in a cycle. And what I mean by that is when she would give these live streams, she started off talking about like looking for her quote-unquote emperor. That's the term that she used. She would also, after a while, she would talk about being in a relationship, and I thought, okay, that's nice. But then usually like a few weeks later, she would also tend to get like really negative about relationships. She would talk a lot about betrayals and, go on about fuckboys and such. Now this isn't necessarily meant to insult people who are constantly in and out of relationships. But this, again, is a person who's like putting herself out there as someone who gives like relationship advice and whatever have you. And this is something that I kind of wanted to point out as like, potentially like, okay, if you're having trouble with your own relationships, then how well can you give advice to other people about their relationships? Just saying. I also noticed another thing that I would definitely say is problematic is that anytime, like, because she had these very strong views about certain things. I'm not going to say what exactly. Like, I'm not going to get into like conspiracy theories or anything like that. But she had these very strong views, and anyone who would come into her live streams and merely disagree with her, like not even like insulting or name calling or anything, like not being disrespectful necessarily, just disagreeing with her, she would insult them. She would insult these people and block them and whatever have you. And like, I know she's like trying to run a business, but on the one hand, but on the other hand, that's like really unprofessional, you know? And the final thing I noticed that really kind of put me on edge about, not really, and made me not really want to watch her anymore was when there was this one person who had like an issue with her readings. Like they had claimed to have asked for a reading from her and paid for it and everything, and they were still waiting for a reading to be done, so they made a video about it. And then she, I guess, found the video, and she publicly aired these things about the issues that they come to her with. And I thought, well, that doesn't seem very cool to me, you know? Like, I know tarot readers aren't really held to the same professional standards as like lawyers or doctors as far as like confidentiality or whatever, but like, someone comes to you and gives you information, and they expect you, or they hope that you'll like keep that to yourself or whatever, and then you go and air it publicly on one of your videos. Like, that's, I don't know, that just I'm not cool with that. I wasn't only watching just this person for advice. Like, I had other people I was watching. Like, this was the only tarot reader I was watching for relationship advice specifically. But thankfully I did have like other like witches on YouTube that I was watching as well, and taking inspiration from. And it should have been easy for me to just drop this person just as soon as I saw problematic behavior and not, watch them anymore. But despite that, I remember being still hesitant initially, because this was the only person that I was watching for like relationship advice specifically. And also I remembered the good feelings that I had when I initially started watching this person. Like, again, like in late 2017, I remember having like these really positive, feelings whenever I would watch, kind of sit down, snuggle up, with a cup of tea, work on a collage or whatever, and watch her videos. And that, that I have really fond memories of doing that. So I guess I had a little trouble kind of like logically I knew I shouldn't watch this person anymore, but emotionally, like, I couldn't quite separate. I couldn't quite make myself stop initially. And that was something that I did notice about myself. And I was also, the main reason was, again, because of the positive emotions that I had experienced when I initially started watching this person, and also because I was nervous about not having any relationship advice anymore, because this was the only person I was watching for relationship advice. So there's that. Only gradually did I come to realize the good feelings that I had initially experienced when I started watching this person were never really gonna come back. I'd also realized that as a person in a long-term romantic relationship, she really had nothing to offer me like anymore. Like, she was mostly, her readings, her advice was mostly geared towards single people, and I wasn't single anymore. So I ultimately, it's kind of like a slower separation than maybe it should have been, but I finally did kind of acknowledge that, yeah, this person's not really helping me anymore, or giving me any emotional support anymore, even. So I did finally step away from this person's channel for good. On the one hand, I do give her some credit for kind of giving me the kick in the pants that I needed at the time that I needed it to deal with my own emotional issues. On the other hand, she did have issues of her own that she might or might not have been aware of. I think it's only natural that we as people outgrow old guides, and it can be difficult when we're emotionally attached to these people. And usually it's only like when our old guides become too problematic that the separation becomes necessary. But even then, like you might not necessarily want to separate because you still have these positive, like emotions tied to this person. But sometimes you got to make a change, and sometimes the change comes slowly, but when it's necessary, it's necessary. I'm not really sure who needs to hear this, but I hope this video finds that person that does need to hear this. There you go. That's my story. So peace and blessings. More videos to come soon. Have a nice day, evening, wherever you are in the world. Peace and blessings.